she was taken from her mother and put into Moore River, which is the mission that my mother was in, the same mission. And she was trained to go out and work. She was trained, and at the age of 14, she was sent out to a station where she was raped by men on that station, and she came back to the mission pregnant. And so she stayed at the mission and had the baby, which immediately was taken from her and sent down to Sister Kate's, which is where the very fair-skinned children went. And then she was sent back to the same station, and of course the same thing happened. And she came back to the mission, gave birth to another child. That child was taken from her again, sent to Sister Kate's, and amazingly, she was sent out to the same station. And of course the same thing happened. She came back pregnant, gave birth, and that child was removed from her as well. In order to get out of the mission, somebody was brought to her. They asked her, they matched them up. She said, they matched us up. And I know what she means. Their colour, they were the same colour, because a lot of the acts that we've lived by in the past, one of the main acts is that we can't, as Aboriginal people, we're not permitted to marry someone who was darker than themselves. Had to marry someone the same colour or lighter than them. And this was the case for her. So she married a man, and they had children, and her children she raised with him, and she told me how difficult this was, because always in the back of her mind was what had actually happened to her as a young woman, and she always wondered about her 3 other babies that were taken. She ended up drinking alcohol, and she said to me she drank alcohol because it killed the pain, it numbed the pain, and while she was drunk she didn't have to think about what had happened. That would go away. She also said the alcohol stopped her from killing herself, that it kept her alive, and she could cope. She could cope better because she could always turn to alcohol. She ended up, of course, becoming an alcoholic, and I guess going to a very dark place where her husband and children could not cope with her anymore, so they separated, and her husband took the children, and she was not in a very good place to care for her children at all. So she ended up living in the parks, and one day she had a fight with another Aboriginal woman. They fought over alcohol, and she stabbed this woman with a bottle that she'd broken off, and stabbed in anger, and the woman died. So she was charged for this incident, and of course for murder, and went to jail. She said she looked at jail as, well, at least she could dry out. Still addicted to alcohol though, but she said that in jail for that time gave her time to reflect and think about her life. But the positive thing for her was She met a social worker who worked in the jail, and the social worker started to talk to her and listen, and she came to a place where she knew she had to deal with the alcohol when she got out. So she started to prepare herself for when she got out, and went to AA. She said that was very difficult because she was the only Aboriginal person there, but she wanted to do that. Admits that there were times when she slipped back and started drinking again, but then picked herself up and got on the straight and narrow again. And from there, she decided to study to get a qualification, and she said that she could start to heal. She started to heal, but she said what she had to do first, before she started to heal, was to let the past go. And in order for her to let it go, she had to forgive. She had to forgive the people in the mission, the missionaries, the manager of the mission. She had to forgive the station owner and his sons and workers. Had to forgive them all. And she had to also forgive herself, and that was very important to her, to forgive herself for what she had been through. Forgive herself because she believed she wasn't a very good mother, she wasn't a good wife, and then she could move on. And she did. She moved on and started the healing process, and she started to heal, and her life became richer, and for her, she went back to country where she was born, and where she lived until the age of 7 or so, 6 or 7, when she was removed. She also went back to Moore River, reconnected there, and she felt that she could then move forward. But I think she stood out for me as a person who, in her 60s, when I interviewed her, at that time she was having chemotherapy because she had cancer. And I remembered saying to her, "What about your cancer?" And her response was, cancer was a walk in the park compared to what she had been through in her life. Prior to finishing my PhD, I received a phone call from her, and it was around Easter time, and she invited me to go to a barbecue at her place. And I decided that I would do that. And when I went to her place, she was so proud to introduce me to her 3 older children. And she said to me, "You know, I've been blessed because I have all my children now with me. I know them all, and I can get to know the older 3 children and their families." So it was a lovely end to her story. She believes that by letting go and forgiving, that this was the payoff for her as well, that things ended right, and that if she was to die with cancer, if it was to take her life, then at least all parts that she wanted fulfilled had been fulfilled.